Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm mindful not to hold up those of us who are on time. I have enabled the no waiting room, so we might have friends joining us, and we will have in between the Zoom sessions and they will just join in when they can this morning to our talk. So welcome, a warm morning welcome to all of you. I'm Cheryl from Covenant Community Methodist Church. I believe that you can see both the slide as well as my face at the small corner of your screen if you widen the screen. Just to also inform you that as per our previous mental health talks, this session is recorded for the benefit that, when you're attending, you might also want to come back to listen to it later. So we will be sending you the recording after the session, as well as some of us, our friends who might not be able to attend today, but would also love the recording, that's also will be provided to them. Yeah, so without further ado, today's topic we are doing is on emotional health and wellness. How can we do our part at home? And we have invited our speaker, Gasper Tan from SOS. And we are also with us today is Reverend David Ho, as well as Zachariah, who will join us on our panelist discussion later on. So just to give help everyone to get a little bit of a organized, understand who's in our talk today. We have actually around 25 to 27 of signups. And many more who will be joining us if they can make it this morning. And we're actually all from different churches. This really shows it's very heartening to me and my ministry and our church that what we're doing as mental health and wellness talk seems to meet the needs of different people from different places. Yeah. So today, let me move on to my slide. Okay, so I will start by opening us in a prayer and introducing the Q&A platform to you all, which is the Slido platform, where you can put in questions that you have in between the talk by Gasper and also during our panel discussion. And then you can also upvote the questions of other people who have put their questions down so that you can get it answered. And some of you who have earlier on submitted some questions to us, we also took note of that, which we will integrate and ask in our panelist discussion later. Right. And after that introduction, I will also pass the time to Gasper, who will guide us through a slide presentation on this topic, and then we'll have a short break around 10 to 15 minutes, and then we will have a panel discussion where I will share with you more about who our special panelists are. All right. If there's any questions, you can also feel free to private message me in the Zoom chat option. I will always be here to help you all with the administrative portion. Okay. So as mentioned, this is the Slido website, and the code we have for Slido 3697567. You can also use the QR code to scan. Don't worry, I will share this again later. And it is also in the chat at the present. Can everybody see that? The chat function in Zoom. Let me resend it in case you all miss it. Yeah. So anytime during this talk, you can click into the website and take a look at some of the questions that might have already been asked, and feel free to upvote or put in your own questions. And our panelists will be very happy to address them later. Okay. Okay. So it's my privilege to be able to open us in a word of prayer this morning. Thank you for being here. Let us just quieten our hearts and welcome the Lord into this place, because He's the one who allow us and enable us, to organize and gather. Father, we give thanks to you for this beautiful morning and for allowing us to organize a talk that allow us to gather, allow us to connect, Allow us to have a platform to just have an intergenerational conversation. And Father, it is through you that we have the heart of compassion, that we have a heart to give and to love and to care for each other. And Lord, I hope that you anoint our speaker, Gasper, as well as our panelists today with your wisdom and with your guidance, so that we can all be of help to each other with our experiences, with our knowledge, and with our heart for you and for families. So we lift up this time into your hands and pray that you protect us wherever we are. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Okay, so without further ado, I will introduce our speaker, Mr. Gasper Tan. Hi, Gasper. Hi. Okay. I've been informed that there is no spacing between the code that I've given earlier for the Slido, yeah? So it's one string of numbers, 3697567, no spacing. Okay, so back to Gasper. Yeah, so I'm so thankful that Gasper has agreed to be invited to speak at this platform when I asked him. So I've worked with Gasper before. He's a wonderful man, very good in what he does in leading the organization SOS. He is the executive director at Samaritans of Singapore and has been actively involved in giving talks and interviews on air, means on radio, and in local conferences on topics related to youth, adults, and mental wellness. So most recently, I believe Gasper spoke at the Christian Mental Health Conference, and many people really, it's a short sharing, right? But it's so impactful and important to hear from this aspect of mental health. So in case some of you don't know, SOS is a secular non-profit suicide prevention center. It adopts a holistic approach to suicide-related topics, focusing on prevention, intervention, and postvention. Yeah, but today, of course, I'm inviting Gasper here. He will not just be delving into this topic of safety and suicide health. Mainly is because he's also a dear Methodist, worshipping at Fuzhou Methodist, and I know he has a heart for other fellow Christians and parents, non-Christians as well, struggling with family related issues, how to connect, or just want to understand more about how to have intergenerational conversations with each other. So he chairs the Care and Connect ministry in his church, which I believe during the COVID times, it's becoming even more needed for the church to extend care and connection to each other, to members. Yeah, and he's, of course, also a proud father of adult son, Joshua, who is currently pursuing his theological studies in the US. He's also serving actively in a local church there. So Gasper, if wherever possible, he will inject some of his personal stories into his sharing as well as discussions. And later in the panel discussion, he is specifically, uniquely answering questions from the perspective of a Christian parent that worked for many, many years in the secular world, both in and outside the social service sector. He also would attempt to later speak as a parent who's acutely aware of secular values and cultural expectations in our society today that can continue to influence how we, children, young adults, think and choices we make. So without further ado, I will pass the time over now to Gasper. Yeah, Gasper, you can share your slide.
Okay, all right. Let me just bring up my slide first. Oh, sorry. You just need to.
No problem.
Can you see?
We can see.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Cheryl, for the comprehensive introduction, so I can skip a few slides. Okay, good morning, and thank you for inviting me to CCMC to share about emotional health and well-being. This is actually a very popular topic, especially in the recent 2 years. But I think it is very important topic to be aware of because total health involves both physical and mental well-being. So today I will share from the perspective of a community service provider, all right? And perhaps we can exchange idea towards the end of my sharing. SOS, a quick introduction, a little bit to add on to what Cheryl has mentioned. SOS was established in 1969, so we are 53 years old. The purpose of this organization is to, our work is actually dedicated to providing confidential and emotional support to individuals facing crises, thinking about suicide or affected by suicide, right? So essentially, our mission is to provide an available lifeline to anyone in crisis. I just want to dwell a little bit into this before we go into the main topic. SOS is probably better known for its 24 hours crisis hotline, but our program and services are beyond just the hotline. Like what Cheryl mentioned, we are integrated end-to-end. So we are the only suicide prevention center in Singapore that provide this integrated approach to suicide prevention or people in crisis. In the prevention, I just want to highlight a few things. In the prevention, that's column number 1. We do a lot of outreach to the community, especially to the youth, frontliners, and through our various evidence-based program. We also work very closely with social media giants like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, to ensure that we create a safer space and platforms for users. In the intervention, which is the column number 2, we have our popular crisis hotline and text messaging service, CareText. During circuit breaker, we introduced this text messaging service, and it has since established itself as a popular help-seeking platform for the youth. Recently, we also launched a pilot project, a pilot support program for suicide attempters. Our objective is to provide platform for these attempters to stay safe, right? And in the column number 3, postvention, we reach out to support suicide survivors, those who lost their loved ones through suicide. So last year, we actually partnered with one church in the east side of Singapore to co-develop a 6-session structured program called Healing Grace to support Christians who lost their loved ones, but prefer to be in Christian support group. So this program was piloted last year, and we have successfully completed one group in March this year. So that's a little bit about the background of SOS. So in the next segment, I want to start by looking at some data and statistics so that we can have a better understanding of mental health landscape in Singapore. You may have read all these recent news, right? It's quite painful, right? And sad, when you read all these things. Mental health issues continue to plague our community in Singapore amidst the pandemic. It will have a long tail end, right? You can see that now people are more impatient, you have a lot of bullying, and also people that are not able to handle or how to respond to people with mental health issues and things like that in the recent news, right? So more needs to be done to preserve the emotional well-being of all. And I think every one of us can play an important role. A survey was conducted by National Population Health in 2020. That's just about 2 years ago. And the survey result shows that the age group between 18 to 29 was the most affected, right? You can see that there's a huge increase of 30.3% versus the year before, versus the year 2017, right? which is just 3 years apart, right? And as recent as May this year, there was another national survey conducted. But this time around, among the young people in the age group of 11 to 18. So the result shows that 1 in 3 youth has reported internalizing mental health struggle, with those in the age group of 14 to 16 having more serious symptoms, right? So if we combine these two surveys, we can conclude that the age group between 11 to 29, right? Because this one is 11 to 18 and the earlier one is 18 to 29. So if we combine these two surveys, you can conclude that the age group between 11 to 29 is not coping well with their mental health and well-being. But these are the survey results, right? So do we observe this in our community? So let's take a look at what we observe in SOS, right? From our hotline service, people call us, throughout the day, 24 hours a day. We do observe that there was an increase of 14.8% in our answered call, from 45,700 calls to more than 53,000 calls in 2021. Just 1 year, we have increased that many calls coming in. And our outgoing call, meaning, we also call out to at-risk client, has also increased by 84%, from 4,000 over calls to 7,000 over calls last year. These were calls that we call to check in with our at-risk clients to make sure that they are safe, right? And common problems reported by youth aged 29 years old and below who has been using our hotline service were vulgar relationship, issues with families, and inability to cope with their presenting crisis. Whereas for adult age group of 30 to 59, mostly on issues related to employment and financial matters. And in our text messaging service, which is also 24 hours service, where people text us, and chat with us. It was also another, we see a huge increase also, of 120% from 4,006 chat the year before to 10,000 chats last year, 2021, and you can see that there is a huge demand now, and people are more comfortable by texting us, instead of calling us. But both services, we see a huge increase in the numbers of clients reaching out to us. So you can see that in text, 82% of our service users, our clients, are from age group of 10 to 29. So the younger group prefer to use text. And the presenting issues were similar to our hotline. And all this observation and earlier survey result that shared earlier give us strong evidence on 2 points. Number one, it gives us a good overall picture of our current mental health landscape in Singapore, right? And number two, it actually indicates and it shows that the younger generations are more vulnerable, but they are also more open about their struggles, and more importantly, they do seek help. Suicide, unfortunately, is a result of people with mental health struggle who usually just want to end their pains, but not their lives. Right? So on average, we have about 402 suicide deaths annually in the last 6 years, which means we have more than 1 death a day. Male typically accounted for more than female in all suicide deaths. And last year alone, male accounted for 68.25% of suicide death in Singapore. So these slides, I just want to show the suicide death rate in Singapore for the past 5 years. There were 378 suicide deaths in Singapore last year, lowest in the last 4 years. Overall, thanks to more efforts and emphasis made by both government and the community, especially in the last 2 years, it has helped in preventing more death by suicide in 2021 compared to 2020. But is this something we can celebrate? If we look at this slide, if we look further into the details, you can see that there was an increase actually in total death in both age group of 10 to 19 years of age and 20 to 29 years old of age. The largest increase was age group 10 to 19 by more than 23% year on year, which is from 30 death to 37 death. It is also a concern as suicide is the leading cause of death for this age group. I mentioned earlier that a lot of efforts and emphasis have been placed on mental health and well-being of residents in Singapore, both at government and community levels, especially to normalize the conversation surrounding mental health, and more importantly, making help seeking more accessible and convenient. I'm proud to say that Singapore probably progressed the most in pursuing mental health agenda among our neighboring countries. I spoke to a few partners in the region. I think Singapore has done tremendously well, and we are very fortunate and blessed in this area. And I'm sure we will be having more announcement on support and help in the coming months. So we have spoken a fair bit about mental health landscape in Singapore. Let's now spend some time to look at some of the ways to preserve or to build our emotional resilience, which will actually contribute to the mental well-being of our overall health. This slide actually summarizes the factors that potentially lead to our mental health struggles and also our overall health, right? Many of these factors were observed in our hotline and care tech services, which I shared earlier. For example, relationship problem, parent-child issues, academic issues, financial problems, and many others. These are all the presenting issues we commonly presented that will lead to will lead to affecting our mental health. And I just want to talk a little bit about Erikson psychological stages, if you have not heard of it. Erikson is one name you might commonly find in Parenting magazine. Erikson was a developmental psychologist who specialized in child psychoanalysis and was best known for his theory of psychosocial development. According to him, a person passes through 8 developmental stages that build on each other's. And each stage, we face a crisis. By resolving the crisis, we develop psychological strength or character traits that can help us become confident and healthy people. So his theory actually gives us a way to view the developmental process or the development of a person through the entire lifespan. I find that these are good tools that we can actually take reference. And I want to quickly just zoom into stage 5. If you look at stage 5, right? The adolescence, which is the age of 12 to 18. At this psychological developmental stage, the child faces the challenge of developing a sense of self. And why do I choose stage 5? Because it affects both the child and the parents and individual like us, right? Because these are the transition in Erikson classification is transition years, and it's very important years of a person development. They form at this age, at this period, they form the child. The children actually form their identity by examining their beliefs, their goals and values. And the key question is, how can we, as a parent, help our child successfully resolve this psychosocial conflict during this transition period? So this model or this tool gives us a guide to look at the psychological strength that we can leverage on. So if you look at column 1, 2, 3, column number 3 from the left, which is fidelity, right? Or loyalty or faithfulness, right? And also the and also the environmental influence, which is peer, right? If you look at this, if we can take advantage of these two strength and environmental influence, I think we can manage better the child through this developmental stage. And it allows us to understand our child and make necessary adjustment for ourselves, within the family, to ensure we have a favorable outcome during these transition years. I say it again that it's a very useful tool that helps us preserve or build our emotional resilience at home, right? So we don't have a time to go into all detail, but you can take reference. It's a very simple tools that give you some indication and be aware of what we need to take care of, and what is the desired outcome that we want to look at, and what if it did not go as well, what is the worst outcome, right? And we spoke about Erickson as a possible tool just now, that we can use to guide us in our preserving and building our emotional resilience. Now, let us explore some of the ways that we can use to help us in building emotional resilience at home. We may not have time to deep dive into each and every one of it, but I just want to quickly share 4 practical ways. Number one is that this is all very simple way that we can actually make adjustment to the way we behave. The first one is practice cognitive restructuring. It sounds title sounds big, but basically it's just changing the way you react to negative situation. Learn to be aware, learn to reflect and see how we can improve from this current situation, so that we can, behave better or react better in the next time, right? In the next time. So for example, if I give an example, if your child make a mistake, as a parents, first thing come to your mind is to reprimand them, to scold them, right? So don't be quick. Maybe what we can do, in this how we react to this negative situation is, don't be quick to judge or reprimand them. Perhaps we can learn to, take a step back and listen and understand why they take that actions, right? And the way they behave, right? Before we reprimand them or even we judge them, right? And this very simple way that we can, make adjustment to ourselves by just, be a listening ear to them first, right? To understand the situation. And the second one is, of course, build strong relationship. And this is very important. The stronger your relationship, the more resilient you become. It is a worthy investment of time to build relationship, whether it's at home or, with your support network. If you have a strong bonding with your parents or sibling or your children, for example, you can always go to them to discuss the challenges you are facing anytime, where you have that safe space and trust, right? You can talk anything to them, and that actually can help, in building your emotional resilience and improve your mental health. The third one is actually practice flexibility, becoming more flexible in both accepting your life choices and the choices made by others. I know it's difficult, it's uncomfortable, but let's start with baby steps. Right? Every time we start with a baby step. One simple example I can give is sharing. Generally, we don't like to share things, right? But at times, due to circumstances and limited resources, we may need to share. So it may make us, like I said, very uncomfortable. But I think we need to learn to adjust and be more flexible, and try to accept that, okay, maybe we can share, so these are things that we can actually practice at home, right? Among the children, among family members. And the last ways that I want to share, practical ways I want to share, is to choose how you respond. The way we respond solidify the way we react in the future situation. So like the 3 points, the 3 ways that I shared earlier will also help to emphasize this point, right? How we choose how we respond. Remember, we always have a choice. For example, sometimes it is good decision to walk away from a situation that make you frustrated or angry. Just walk away instead of confronting it head on. In Chinese, they say, 忍一时风平浪静，退一步海阔天空, right? And this is, basically the same concept. You just take a pause, step away, and then you will cool yourself down, right? And that will make you more mature in your decision making, right? And I think these are some of the simple ways that we can try at home, right? But what about parents? How can we help as a parents? I know Cheryl asked me that, we must talk a little bit about parents. I think school nowadays provide a lot of parenting talks and parent support group. I would seriously encourage parents to join, or caregiver, right, to join and participate in them. It is a good platform and resource that will help and support you in your parenting journey. There were also good article published by Straits Times a week ago, in this slide I extracted out. They provide relatively good recommendation and testimonies from parents. You can see that they encourage parents to participate in school, to understand, the development process of the children and things like that. So some key takeaway messages from these articles, they highlighted the word strong bonding, participation, involvement, which I think as a parents, we need to be mindful and we need to actually involve in that strong bonding process, participation process, involvement process, which will result in building trust and better understanding of each other's emotional needs, and definitely the outcome will be positive for both parents and children. Right. So again, I would encourage you to read them. It's just last week, I think last Sunday article. Yeah. And also spend time, invest our time in attending parenting talk, that school giving, and the support group. So these are the things that I think are the tools, the ways, so as a parents, what we can do. But what about as a Christian? Do Christians struggle with mental health? Right, that's also another question that we ask ourselves. Right, it is true that anybody can struggle with their mental health, whether the person is old or young, a male or female, believer or non-believer. Struggle with mental health does not make you less of a Christian or less of a person. And when I prepare this, I ask myself, hey, do we have a character in Bible who struggle with mental health? Because if I bring up this question, people will be asking me, hey, do we have a character? And yes, if you are familiar with the story of Prophet Elijah in the Old Testament, in 1 Kings chapter 19, he struggled with suicidal thoughts during a difficult time in his life remember when he heard Queen Jezebel murderous threat on him, and he ran for many days and then he collapsed, right? Feeling exhausted, lonely, frightened, and perhaps defeated also. And in his desperation, he begged God to end his life. You see, Elijah was one of the greatest prophets and miracle workers in Hebrew scriptures, right? But he was also a human, just much like you and I. And why, how do we know that he's a human? We know he's a human because in James chapter 5, verse 17, NIV version, actually has the word that says Elijah was a human being. So he's actually a human being. He is subjected to all this mental struggle also. And how did the story end? God responded, right? But not to his request. God instead comforted, assured, and renewed Elijah with double portion of food, drink, and rest. Rest, right? So if you take some guidance from God, hey, sometimes when we are exhausted, we are, desperate, or sorry, we are depressed, or we are struggle with mental health, or we have a difficult situation to overcome. Sometimes we need to just come to God, and also don't forget, God also give you some guidance. Say, hey, enjoy some food and some drink, and more importantly, you must rest. And after that, God sent him out again with new commission. So whether in victory or despair, we can always trust God. He has a greater plan. His plan is greater than ours, right? And this is in the Old Testament. What about in modern times? Do Christians struggle with mental health? I want to share a story of a dear friend of mine. Her name is Margaret. She struggled with mental health as a caregiver to her husband, who is suffering from schizophrenia. He relies on God's strength to see her through her struggles. She also God also comforted and assured her and journeyed with her as a caregiver and a mother to 2 sons. Her husband's condition is getting worse, and that was what she told me recently when we met for lunch. But I saw peace in her and her total surrender to God to lead her in this matter. And she is very joyful when we have lunch, and she share the struggle. She also share how she overcome it. But I think more importantly, let me get her to share her testimony with you in her own personal words, right?
I fell out of love with my husband because I could not accept the change I saw in him. My name is Margaret. I'm married to Leslie Ng, and I have 2 boys, Jeremy and Ryan. My husband was diagnosed with paranoia disorder, and that's essentially schizophrenia. In the early days, not being exposed to mental illness, I don't know how to read those signs. The illness manifested in a lot of ugly symptoms, which when you have to face that day in and day out, you ask yourself the question, how could I ever love this person? I tried to walk up twice. I tried giving up. But it's always the love that draws me. The love of Christ helped me look at my husband through the lens of love. And because of that, I fell in love with him all over again. I was sad. In fact, I was grieving when I saw his condition worsen, and I had a lot of guilt. Guilt, the fact that I sent him to IMH for treatment against his wishes. In the growing years of my kids, they resented the fact that they have to take on additional responsibility for their dad. But in their heart, they love their dad. As we look back, we were really fortunate that we have God behind us. and we felt that we were overcome because we were able to even celebrate little victories and also look for opportunity to enjoy my husband during the journey. Example, when my husband is more engaged, when my husband is able to express himself, hug the boys and say, I love you, son. I miss you, son. That's what we live for, right? Feeling the love here. When we hear my husband expressing his love for us, or saying he misses us, kind of wipe away sadness that we used to experience. Instead, we have tears of joy. I pray for my husband's salvation. I pray that he will come to embrace Christ. Darling, I don't regret marrying you. Without you, we would not be blessed with Jeremy and Ryan. Through this journey, I discovered my true love for you. I will always love you, and may you be united with Christ and his everlasting love. Darling, heaven is without sickness. I pray the day will come you will see Christ in glory. Always my husband, in sickness and in health. I fell out of.
Okay, so that's story of my dear friend, and and her personal testimony, and her journey, and she found comfort and peace in God, who journey with her throughout this journey. All right, I just want to conclude that it is important to, with all these things that we shared, it is important, mindful of the time, Cheryl. I just want to conclude that it's important that we understand that resilience is not linear. Okay, number one, no one is perfect, right? Resilience comes and go in various situations, even though we know all the knowledge, tools, ways, and things like that. Sometimes we will be broken. We will feel weak, right? So it's okay to struggle from time to time. And number two, resilience isn't in vulnerability. It is normal to feel vulnerable in unfamiliar or in certain situations. It's okay. But third, I think it's the importance of seeking help. When we face with mental health struggles, it is important that we seek help early. The support system you receive will be able to reduce your stress and anxiety level effectively, especially at early stages. Last but not least, I just want to share some of the available community resources that you can go to if you want, or if you or your loved ones need to seek help. Of course, the first community resource is SOS, right? You can always call us, text us, or even email us. We also provide free specialist counseling for acute cases. Or you can go to these few available community resources in Singapore. We have Institute of Mental Health, Singapore Association for Mental Health, Silver Ribbon Counseling and Care Center. And this morning we covered quite a fair bit. Unfortunately, this is a huge topic, and we can talk. There are a lot of things to cover. But we look at so what we covered this morning is the mental health landscape in Singapore with data and evidences, to let you have a feel of where we are in Singapore at this point in time. We also talk about some tools and ways to preserve or build emotional resilience, like Erickson psychosocial stages, and also some practical ways of it, right? We also talk about, as an individual, as a parent, and as a Christian, we are all vulnerable, and resilience is not linear. There are ups and downs in our life, and we need to be aware. Important is to be aware and know how and where to seek help. And lastly, we look at some community resources that we can all go to. And that brings me to the end of my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Jasper. Thank you for bringing us through the slides. I think there's a lot to glean from that. And some of us may already have some questions brewing in our mind from your brief sharing. And I think for now we have a 10 minutes break. Let me share screen. Yeah. Okay, so everyone, we have a 10 minutes break. Do come back in 10 minutes. You can go have a quick bite or go to use the restroom. But meanwhile, I will leave this Slido website and code on the screen. So in case, you know, whatever you're doing, do log into this. We already have some questions there, including those that some of you have posted. I have put it up as the admin. And other questions that y'all can individually add on. Do feel free to do that or upvote the questions that you think are interesting to you. All right, and we'll come back to address it in 10 minutes time. So see you back here at 10:30. Thank you. Hello, hi everyone. Can you hear me? Welcome back. Welcome back. It will be, as now we are entering into the panelist discussion, it would be great if those of you who are able to on your videos to join us with your online presence. That would be very helpful. So this is, as I left off with showing the Slido website and code. And I hope, of course, you all managed to access that. Otherwise, in the next hour or so, feel free to still continue to go in to put in your questions. And I will, welcome back. So I will also take the opportunity now to just introduce our special panelists that we have invited online with us. Okay, so of course, Jasper will be on the panel as well, but with us today also we have Reverend David Ho, our CCMC pastor. He's overseeing our pastoral care ministry as well. And Pastor Ho is really invited today as a panelist to lend his insights from the perspective of a pastor and a parent with 3 adult children. 2 boys, 1 girl. And Pastor Ho has been a pastor since 1997, many years, and has overseen various ministries related to family life and pastoral care. And from my interactions with him, I know, his heart and passion is really in strengthening families, marriages, communicating with parents, youth, and children about how to relate with each other. And Pastor Ho is also a cancer survivor and has many interesting and insightful anecdotes to share with us, from his parenting journey. Of course, when the chance arises and it's relevant to the questions that we pose. So hi, Pastor Ho. Hi. And okay, so next I will introduce also Zachariah, Zach for short. Zach, hi Zach. Zach is our young adult. He has recently completed his university studies in NUS. Zach is a familiar face to our OC, which is our youth and young adults YA, OCYA, and is currently serving in the YA committee to better connect YA across various stages of life. So from my understanding and interactions with Zach, he's really a quiet but really thoughtful individual that constantly strives to do the best he can. As a young adult, he is still discovering himself in his career and aspirations. But he's also fulfilled many expectations that's expected of him to be the right standing good son, good member of society, do his best, responsible child. Yet he also has his fair share of mental health and wellness battles through the growing up journey, through coming of age, through probably interacting with parents and peers. And thus, we are really grateful to have him here today to lend his insights to us from the perspective of a young Christian adult in Singapore on this topic of emotional wellness and, what role can parents play. We don't want to just only have parents' views, but of course have a child's view as well. So, okay, let me I will stop share the screen so that we can see our panelists, in one line. And those of us who can on our videos, feel free to just do that anytime. And I would also trouble Laura. Thanks, Laura, for helping us behind the scenes to man the Slido website. Could you share screen to let us know what are some of the questions that are there? And if there's anyone that is upvoted so that I can take a look and we can post those questions to our panelists. Okay, so, yep. All right, so we have 9 questions. Perhaps some of you who have not included your questions have already asked, and it's actually under the admin lah. So I put in the questions for you all beforehand. So the top 3 questions that have been received at least 2 votes. We can all see from here. I think 2 of the questions are quite similar. First 2 actually. Having conflicts and disagreement at home, what are suitable roles that a parent can play towards an adult child? Or what can you do as a parent when your child doesn't want to talk to you after a conflict? What if he or she becomes quite extreme after that, even seeming like a different person? So that is one question I think we can answer together as a panel. Perhaps this can be, there is both the parent's perspective. I think the question is asking the roles that a parent can play. So perhaps either Jasper or Pastor Ho can take on this question and we can flow from there.
Reverend Ho, you want to go on first?
Let me start by saying this. Conflict is normal. In other words, if a family they have no conflict, that means they probably wasn't interacting each other at all. All of us are different. We have different preferences. We have different ideas. We got certain things that we want. And when we can't agree with what we want with another person, that's where conflict starts. So the thing is that conflicts are normal. The question is, how do we therefore handle and through a time of conflicts? So I can only share with you some principle here, because unless I completely understand the detail, probably there will be more on a counseling session where we want to help you, but I can only share some general principle here. So first thing, conflict is normal, and there's something we see. Secondly, take a step back. If you are in the family, for example, you're saying that you're a parent, but you have an adult child at home. My question is a conflict between you and your child, or your child with somebody else? One of the things is, don't be too quick to fix it. Sometimes I see people who come to see pastor for help. For example, when I'm doing youth ministry, they come to see me to want me to fix their son because their son is misbehaving at home, and it's quite easy that we think somebody is the problem, and that is all we need to fix that person. Often in a family situation, it's more systemic, and we need to look at the bigger picture. So I remember I was doing the youth ministry. I realized that as I counsel the parents, I realized that the parents themselves are not talking to each other. They are not on the same page on how they care for their child, and they send a lot of confusing signal to their child. So when we look at systemic, we try to see things in the bigger picture and how to help everyone in their role in the family. So that is one important thing. Second one is communication. I think it's very good, important to learn about how we communicate. A lot of time conflict come about not just about the fundamental issue, but the way we say things. If we start attacking somebody instead of handling the issue, you can be sure the conflict will escalate. You go into downhill spiral often because you start attacking the person. You are always like that. You never change. This kind of words are not helpful, because the word you attack somebody, you use the word never, always. You're already putting a character flaw on the person. But rather talk about what the issue is. Third thing is I believe many things scripture teaches us forgiveness. Forgiveness is one of the biggest things that keep family going, even when there are conflicts that don't seem to be able to resolve overnight. Forgiveness. With forgiveness, also to learn how to apologize, how to say sorry. And I know that sometimes as a parent, we think on a higher level, we find that it really take you a lot of humility to say sorry to your children. But those are necessary. This is what scripture teaches us. Learning how to acknowledge our wrong with repentance, but yet there's grace and forgiveness in the family. So I think these are some of the things that I can share at this moment. Gasper, back to you.
Yeah, certainly. I think Reverend Ho actually bring out a few key important points, forgiveness and don't quick to give solutions and things like that. But I think I want to look from the other point, just to complement, is that it's a big question. Actually, this is a big question. Whether it's environmental issues or is it hygiene issues, we need to know the context, so that we can just jump in and talk about it. But what I'm concerned about was the second question, where you say that what if the person is extreme, right? Extreme means rage, or out of mind and things like that. I think the first thing to do is safety of both person, right? To make sure that because when the person is extreme or rage, no matter what you try to tell or try to reason, it will never go in. Just imagine yourself when you are very, very angry. When people tell you cool down, will you cool down? You will still take some time, right? So I think important is to make sure that when the person is at rage, is to make sure that everybody is safe, right? The person is safe. There's no sub-object or things that can use. And you yourself also need to be safe first, right? Stay away, keep yourself a distance, right? And I think when you have a distance, I think give each other a space first, right? To calm down, to cool down, right? No need to go and try to resolve the issues. And that's what I want to add on to what Reverend Ho said. It's important to make sure that we are safe before we, take the next step or even talk about it. Yeah.
I'd like to add on to what Gasper talking about people in rage. How about you yourself, who are the person who have anger management problem? I think first thing to start with, to have a self-awareness that you do have this problem, and you need to learn skill sets on how to take time out, how to cool down, how to watch symptoms of yourself when your rage is rising up in you, so that you can take a step back for yourself. And for the others, somebody's in a rage, like what Gasper said, don't continue to provoke. Take a step back, cool down, take time out, then come back again later to talk to you. When one is in a rage, usually they become irrational. There's no way you can reason anything.
Oh yeah, so just to resonate to what Reverend Ho mentioned just now about self-awareness, it's very important. But the question is, how do I know that my mental health state is good or not? I think the first step we can do is to find someone that you can trust, whether it's your sibling or your pastors or your parents, and tell them that, can you help to observe me, the next 1 month or 2 weeks? How is my mental state? How do I behave? How do I, so be open to it, so that you can create that awareness. Like what Reverend Ho said, awareness is very important. When you are aware, then you take steps to see how to overcome it. And a lot of times when we then, talk or we read articles, we say, oh, you must be self-aware, but many people don't know how to be a self-aware. But I think the first step is to just, reach out to someone you can trust and say, hey, observe me. Let me know if, let's say, I'm, out of tune, right? And then if that out of tune consistently, in the next 2-3 days or 4 days, then first thing to do is to maybe go and look for your GP first. All right, GP are able to diagnose a very basic steps, right, of your mental health, right? and better condition. Maybe he can recommend you for therapy or time out, that kind of thing. So it's very important. I just want to resonate what Reverend Ho says, is to be self-aware. Right?
Yeah.
And
thank you both, Pastor Ho and Jasper, for that insight. I think it's really coming from a parent's perspective also when it comes to handling conflicts at home. And I hear that, it sounds like there's a deep need for humility as well. Like when Pastor mentioned, it takes both hands to clap, and taking that difficult step to reflect, like what Jasper say, to self-reflect and also to acknowledge areas where an apology might be needed in order to reconnect. That's what is difficult, but yet it can be very helpful. And also sometimes the distance is needed for things to cool down. Yeah, but perhaps, there still needs to be a connection after that, for someone to step forward. And that might be the role of a parent, no matter how big your child, how young your child is or how big they have become, right? A child is always a child. So, but of course, I'm curious also to hear from Zach, from the not a parent point of view, how do you see that, what is shared?
I actually do agree with a lot of what they've mentioned, but I'll just add on one additional point in that when we're talking about the relationship part, I don't know who posted this question, and I also don't know how your family situation is as well. But I would say that, at least from a child's perspective, one of the hardest things to do is to be able to listen. And I think it's also quite true for many of us as youths, because more specifically, at least for the younger generation, we are now growing up in a society that's a lot more interconnected, a lot more online, as always. But the problem is that a lot of these parasocial relationships, one of the key things that's usually missing is really that deep connection at times. And so being a parent or being that sibling, the best thing that you can do in the most difficult times is that you need to know how to listen. You need to know how to, at times, maybe just say, I don't know what's going on, but I'll try my best to find out. And I think that is probably one of the more important aspects about this part, where you may have conflict at home, or you may have other situations at home that you may not have expected. And I think the first step is to always listen. I think it's also the same in what it says in the Bible, that sometimes even in our busy lives, we would need time to stop and listen. And I also do think that that will probably be quite difficult for a child, because for many of us, well, quite short attention spans now, so much information in our hands, we're not sure what to do with it. And so, yeah, I think that's also another important point that we should also learn, to be able to take that time to listen. And listening isn't just, hearing one ear in, one ear out, but to take that information, to process it, and maybe to take time to reflect on what it means. Maybe I won't fully comprehend it, but just because you've managed to try to listen, it will definitely improve your relationship at all levels.
Can I just add up a little bit there? I noticed that you mentioned about how about my adult children. I think the first thing to remember, if they're adult, it's not the children anymore. So your way you communicate as a parent to your children who are now adult, you have to communicate to them as adult. You can't do this, I'm your parent, I'm your father, I said so kind of attitude. You need to converse with each other as equal adults to adult, and to talk things, to listen well, and that kind of thing. I think when Gasper talked about the developmental stages, we need to be aware that each stage we also relate to our children at different stages in different ways.
Thanks, Pastor, and thanks, Zach, for that insight. I think listening, again, it's a big thing that, it's a challenge coming from a young, growing up, and then also becoming an adult, having a mind of your own, right? That's even more important. Okay, so maybe we look at the next question. Laura, how is the Slido coming along? Yeah. Okay, so I think the first two questions, first question, okay, that the other first two questions have been answered. So the one next on the list is, if you have a family member at home with a mental health problem, how should family members support? Like what role they can play, be it as a sibling, a spouse, a parent, or a child? I think this might be a diagnosed or undiagnosed kind of condition. Perhaps, what might be some of coming from different perspectives, I think all three of you can perhaps give a short insight into this. If you have a family member at home struggling, it can be a diagnosed or non-diagnosed condition. How can you play a role? Okay, so then of course, taking note that there's another two more questions that have two parts. One is what has God laid on your heart for the vision or dream for the local church in Singapore in terms of our God-given role in the mental health scene? And then in this discerning journey, what would that vision look like, and what would our churches be doing more of or less of? Okay, so I think that's a separate theme altogether. Maybe we can focus on just helping to answer that first question first. Laura, you can close the screen. Thank you. Well, Jasper and just now Pastor David started. Maybe Jasper, you can start this time.
Yeah, maybe I can start. Cheryl highlight very important question, whether it's a diagnosed or undiagnosed situation. But before that, let's take a step back. I think that's the reason why I say building bonds, have a strong family relationship is always very important. When you build that bonding, you build that relationship, you build that trust, right? And when there's a trust, then you can talk about, issue like this, right? You don't go and approach someone and say, hey, how are you? Looks like you got problem, very weird, right? I think, and sometimes it's not also, you need to also find ways, there are ways and approaches to like this. But what I want to highlight is that it's important that we build relationship at home. And in my presentation earlier, I said the investment in building that relationship, whether or not from parents to children or children to parents, are very important, right? When you build that support system, then you can talk about all these things. So let's talk about if it's diagnosed. Right? If it's diagnosed, then I think when you have that trust, then you can sit down and say, how build that plan together with the person, right? And not just your plan, or you go and Google, that's what we like to do, right? Google and all the answer will be out, how to support and things like that. But I think it has to be that person plan, how to support the person, right? And that's why I say, if you don't have that trust, then very difficult to go and call everybody together and sit down and look at what to do, right? But if you can have that trust and he or she feel that the trust is there, he can share or she can share more with you, then you can actually encourage him or her to sit down and work out that support plan. And that's very important. And if it's undiagnosed, then again, trust is very important, right? And that the trust you and he or she can trust you, then you can actually approach the person directly and say, would you like to see a doctor, right? We don't have to say mental health specialist or whatever. First step is to go to GP also, it's okay. Because now government is also trying to get GP to do the first diagnosis level already. And GP, basically, they have the basic knowledge to look at the basic mental health condition. So that will remove some stigma, right? So yeah, so that's my quick answer to that.
Okay, thanks, Jasper. Zach or Pastor, it would be good if any one of you, if you have personal anecdotes or know of people who have go through that kind of trying family situations to share as well. Feel free to share that.
I want to share this from both a family member perspective as well as a pastor's. We need to recognize that we don't know everything. As a pastor, people come to me presenting all kind of problems. We don't know. We don't have all the solution. Neither sometimes we know about what this problem, especially the mental wellness problem, is all about. And so the key is educate yourself. Educate. Coming to this seminar helps you to educate yourself as well. So in educating yourself, you begin to understand and also realize your own limitation, whether you have ability to help or not. And And therefore, because you know your limitation, then you also find out the resources that what Gasper said, you know how to refer. I remember when my own mother had dementia, I was clueless about what's dementia all about. And all she did was she accused all of us of stealing her thing. And we all got so angry with her. We picked a fight with her and not realizing that was actually a dementia problem. So we took it so personally, and the family was just going through a conflict. And then when my mother complained to my sister get angry with me that I didn't take care of my mother. But actually, until my mother went to stay with my sister, then she get the brunt of it. So these are things that because I learned from the experience, and of course, after that, I go and read up, go and learn about dementia. Now my own mother-in-law is having dementia. We are better able to help her, but now she is also diagnosed. But the diagnosis only confirmed for us, but at least we learn how to support her, how to help her, how to engage her, so that she can continue to live happily, and know how to handle when she have a meltdown. So education, educate yourself, read up, attend seminar, and things like that. That would be very helpful.
Thanks, Pastor. Educating yourselves, yes, and
Pastor, I need to educate myself too when I try to help my member. Yeah.
Yes. How about Zach? Is there, how was your journey like? If you don't mind sharing more, or that how did people help you at home, or you felt that was good or bad, in that, be it personally or how you heard from other people struggles.
I think just for context, for those that have a bit no clue what's going on, I would say that even I did suffer from mental health issues when I was younger as well. And I believe that over time and over personal reflection, I also realized that, yeah, I couldn't have done it on my own. There were a lot of people that helped me to get out of my own mental health issues. I have twice before tried to take my own life as well. And the thing is that throughout that entire journey of then until now, throughout my entire adolescence, one of the key things that stood out for me was that the people that did help me, right, did so because they genuinely cared for me, and they consistently reached out to me. Now, I'm not trying to say that, you're a bad parent if you just give up on your child, or you can't do it, or you can't manage it. That's not the point. The point I'm trying to make here is that if we are talking about help for mental health, it is a concerted effort from everyone, and it requires that consistent effort. And consistent effort isn't just once in a while saying, oh, how's your day? Consistent effort is trying to see, hey, what's going on in your life right now? Hey, what can I do to help you? I think one of the hardest parts for people who have mental health issues is that for many of us, we are truly scared to ask for help because we don't know what will happen. And that uncertainty holds us back from even trying. And so if you are in a position where you can actually help someone, do so. Try and walk with them as much as possible. Yes, it will be tiring. Yes, it will be very troublesome because you have to go out of your way to like, oh no, this is not my life anymore, but I have to go look out for him or her. But the most important thing is that if you do genuinely care for these people, the only way that they will ever open up to you is if you genuinely initiate it first. And I think it's the same for those of us that suffer from mental health issues, and that we are so scared to do it. But in today's context, I feel that it is a lot safer and it's a lot more understood of what mental issues we suffer as adolescents and even as young adults, people, all walks of life. We all have a better understanding of how mental health can impact us. And so the stigma that a lot of people say is there, I would say that over the past few years has definitely gone down. In fact, more resources have come up to support many of these people in various walks of life. Yeah, so I would say that at least in my own journey of having those suicidal thoughts, of trying to pull myself up as well, I found that the most useful thing wasn't just myself, it was the people around me. And I do think that if you do have people that in your family that are struggling, your little help may not seem significant now, but if it is truly genuine and if it is truly consistent, then I can tell you, you're making a huge impact in their life.
Thanks. Thank you, Zach. Thank you for sharing that. I mean, I really resonate with that part of you who said that, when you are faced with a mental health challenge and, you might be trying to cope in different ways. It can come in the form of really self-harming. It can come in even more extreme forms of really concerning what's the purpose of your life. And for other, because I'm a counselor, so I do know that I do see youth and young adults, and sometimes what they present with is really, like extreme anger, or, behavioral issues, or even going into alcohol, numbing. And, those to me are also signs that, you're trying to cope in your own system. Yeah, and we don't want a person presenting with just, anger issues to go all the way to the end to find more extreme ways to cope also. So those are good signs to pick up that someone's not doing too well at home, right? And I really feel like what you mentioned about the persistent going after the constant check-ins are also what I've also heard that's been helpful, especially in a home environment, right? And that role, what better it is than if it's the parent or a sibling or a caregiver, right? So thanks for sharing that insight with us. Yeah. Okay, so next question, just to make sure we cover as much as we can. Laura, appreciate your help to share screen again. Okay, so I think just now I mentioned what has God laid on your heart, the vision or dream for the local church in Singapore in terms of our God-given role in the mental health scene? And in that discerning journey of what is in your heart for the mental health scene, what would that vision look like? And how would our churches be doing more of or less of? Yeah, so I believe this person who asked this question has a heart for the mental health scene, and would also want to know how the church plays a role in that, and how can, as a member of a church, perhaps do more of. I guess that question may be suitable to be answered by all three also given a different point of view. But who might want to start first? Is Pastor Ho okay, or is it something up your plate?
The church has many rules, and one of the rule is to strengthen the family. So when we come to, I wouldn't just say mental health as an issue itself about family, but I think a bigger, broader picture. What the church can do in terms of this area is, I would say the first one is preventive, and second one is remedial. Preventive in terms of education about these topics, as well as equipping of people to know how to help. So there's an awareness that these are issues, these are things that does exist in the church. We are not afraid. And the church must be a place where it's safe. You don't feel like you come in, you got some mental health problem, everybody stay far away from you. It must be a church where we are so loving and we embrace each other. So like we say, do not have the stigma. I see no reason why we should have stigma. I mean, if I got COVID, I stay home, but I don't have a stigma. So just like we can have physical illness, we can have mental illness as well, because we're all body, soul, and spirit. And just so we also have spiritual illness, and we need to look at each of them and say, what's God's answer for us. So remedial work. That's why Cheryl comes in to do our counseling work. All right. Remedial and equipping and education. Again, Cheryl has been organize these talks, and I think it's wonderful. It really help. We want to help people who struggle so that they know they are accepted, they are cared for. They know the church will be surrounding them. We want the kind of environment. Education help them to be aware of what they have, and so they know how to move forward. Equipping is also to equip those who doesn't have mental health, about how we can come alongside with those people who are struggling and know how to help. So those are very important. the other things that the church too need to have a panel of resources, external outside the church too, so that we know how to refer. I've been to a few churches, and some of our churches have very good counseling ministry. But you know one thing, church members don't go to their own church counseling ministry. They often go to another church because they don't want things to be known within the church. Or even though we assure that the counseling ministry keep things very confidential. But having said that, in the church that I had, we have a very established counseling. We have a lot of members from other churches who come to our church, which is fine, because I think that's what the body of Christ is. My member go to your church, your member come to my church because they want to be anonymous, to feel safe. It's good. I think that's where this networking of resources, of ministry together. I think Gasper has been also saying that they did something with the church in the East. We should do a lot more together, and and have a network of support for each other, learning for one another the better practices.
Yeah. Thank you, Pastor, for that. So I hear you mention about families and strengthening families. And I think that's very aligned with what you earlier mentioned about education and just getting aware that just like COVID, how I think initially people were stigmatizing the ones that were having COVID. But once it becomes so normal, people realize that we're not going to die from it because we have a government that protect us with as much as possible. Once we are able to keep healthy, get our jabs, and it's normalized. So, more often than not, I'm also advocating that mental health is something everyone would go through up and down. And, there's no need to think that you are worse off than another person that doesn't seem to have an issue. And it's when we normalize it, we have more people coming forward. And the church wants to be able to provide that support, be it through your own church, or if you know of another church that has a counseling arm or advocacy work that they are doing, you can always go and support and get help also. So thanks for sharing that. How about Gasper and Zach? Anyone can?
Yeah, maybe I just want to add on. I think Reverend Ho brought up one very important aspect. To me, as a church member, I see church as a safe space, right? It's an important space that we go to, not just for prayer, not just for Sunday service, but it's a space where we connect as a body of Christ, right? So there are a lot of church members that come together. Many of times, I do hear people say, "Oh, church is now a Sunday kind of activities, right? Monday to Friday, church is empty, right? Which is very sad because in the olden days, church actually people come to, study. School children will go there, assemble there, and then they study and they support each other and things like that. But Reverend Ho brought up a very important point because we need to remove that stigma, in the church to talk about mental health. Otherwise, your church member come to service and they cannot relate their issues, to people who trust, especially the pastors or some church lay leaders and things like that. And I'm very heartened to hear when Cheryl said that she joined this Covenant Community Methodist Church. They are going to start a counseling ministry. I said, wow, not very often you hear a church will have a counseling ministry, on their part, because that actually build that, remove that stigma, right, about talking about mental health or emotional resilience. So important is that as a church itself, I think we need to constantly see, in my vision, my hope as a member of a church, to constantly remove that stigma, whether to have like today the mental health talk, and then also counseling, and then support those people with mental health struggles. All right, thankful that Jack share his personal testimony. Maybe, yeah, these are the people that that become your resources, that they can actually go out now to support, the other people who needs help, right? And of course, we have to make sure that individual local churches have to have that safe space, so that people can trust and go to you to find help. And as a group in Singapore, just now Cheryl also shared that I recently attended this Christian mental health conference. I'm heartened to also see that this thing happened in Singapore, where we gather churches together, pastors come together to this conference, and we provide that safe space for pastors to share their struggles. And this is a closed door event, right? We have pastors that share their personal struggles, their mental struggles, and also talk about ways how to collaborate, right? How to equip themselves, right? What Reverend Ho said, he himself want to also equip himself. And that's very important as a pastor. You don't just preach and do this, but you also need to care for your team, right? Your members, right? And how do you care? Not just the sick, but the sick, not just physically, but also mentally, right? And I think that is a very good platform. And I do see that, churches in Singapore, with this Christian mental health conference, we should be able to gather the like-minded, gather the churches together to collaborate. Not necessarily you need to build your own resources, right? There are external resources, like just now I mentioned that last year, through the conference, we actually partnered with one of the church in the eastern part of Singapore to co-develop using our program. Our is a very scientific program, right? Evidence-based scientific program, but we sit down with them and co-develop with them with also input from Focus on the Family. We inject in the spiritual element, right? And we become a kind of a Christian kind of counseling to support those, who suffered, right? Loss of their loved ones, right? And now the church is extending this service to the eastern part of the Singapore churches, right? By collaborating with other churches, say, hey, you don't have to build. We already have that program, Now if you have anyone, call me, and send your members here. This program is actually very confidential, like what Reverend Ho say, they are protected, nobody knows you come to this kind of support and things like that. So it's a good start. And remember also that churches don't have to build their own capability, can partner with community resources. We are more than happy to support to partner with churches to see how to make it into your program and how to support your members. Yeah.
So thank you, Jasper, for sharing that. Something to highlight that I'm also heartened to share is, even in the Methodist circle, the counselors across different Methodist churches with a counseling ministry like Wesley Barker, we finally gathered together to want to start networking and fellowshipping and sharing struggles with each other and how we can, support each other better in the work we do. And sometimes even equipping new Methodist churches who want to start the ministry. That is also what I've been actively part of the last 1 month or so. And it's really seeing God at work, that it's not because it's something new and then we need, to have some more support for mental health. It's just that sometimes we don't have the resources. And now we just want to gather them together to share with each other. And not forgetting Zach also, what is a vision that you have, from your point of view, maybe even taking up the next generation point of view of how you see the church can do better off, to better support the mental health or health in general in Singapore and in the churches.
I think one of the hardest parts that we will have to overcome is, I was mentioned, the stigma behind it. I do think that right now, for many people, they tend to have a poor view of churches or even other places which help those with mental illnesses, mainly because we think that, it's like if you go to these places, that means you're a terrible person or you're just completely broken, you can't do anything about it. But I think people also tend to forget the fact that the church is designed for broken people. It is designed for those that have a lot of troubles and issues. The question is whether or not we would like to take that time and initiative to help all these people. And I'm not saying that, you know, like what we said, it will be difficult if you don't have enough resources. It's also difficult if you don't have the time. But then if we don't spend the time helping people, we don't spend the time literally living out the gospel, then why do we even go to church? I think that's also the most important point for those that attend. Those that right now are in the church, I do think that there is a higher calling for each and every one of us to use our talents well, to help those around us as well, even if it's a small part of it. And at least my own understanding is that maybe in the near future, we won't have this stigma and possibly maybe even become a place where people are referred to, because I do genuinely believe that at the end of the day, many of our mental health issues do stem from the fact that people don't have a proper understanding of what a healthy relationship should be, or they've been exposed to a lot of abusive relationships that, or even in extreme cases, completely broken relationships. And so I do think that in time, and my hope and prayer for it is that in due course, that the churches will be able to show that church is not just a haven for perfect people, but rather a place where you can mend broken relationships and maybe even expose other people to an understanding of what a good healthy relationship should be. Yeah. And I know that for a fact that yes, this is very difficult because you need time, you need effort. But if we are not living out the gospel, then I would say that, well, you probably haven't fully understood what it means to live life for Christ yet. And I would say we should start from there. Yeah.
Thank you, Zach. Thank you, Zach. And I think from also, I hear you mentioning also the whole need to learn, right? To educate ourselves. Again, repeating what Pastor Ho mentioned. And I will sell some koyok lah. I know from CCMC, we also have befriending program that just started under the Pastoral Care Ministry. And of course, it's new to the church. It's a slow take-up rate, but that's really a platform for normal church members to go do visitations to other families in the church, to see how other people are living their lives behind the scene and those that needing support. I think it doesn't have to be, or you go for counseling or you get trained to be a counselor, before you can help with the skills. Sometimes the education comes from just being in the community and just serving. And it brings us back to self-reflection also. Oh, is this happening in my family? Or how would we want to better build our relationships with people we know, and so that they don't fall into the same category, So a lot of preventive work. And I didn't come being a counselor knowing how family should work either. I had to study it, and I don't expect everybody here to have to go through that rigorous study of theory of family systems and everything. But even through experiencing different families in the counseling room, I see, what's really lacking, and like what Zach mentioned, that need to look at our own struggles and brokenness, and then relate better to how we want to build better relationships, to learn along the way lah. Nobody is perfect lah. Like in Jasper's slide, I think you mentioned that also. Nobody is perfect. Yeah. Okay, so we do have, I think, 2 more questions. Laura, please share screen to let me just have a look. So there is a question: how can we cope with negative emotions in a healthy way from a Christian perspective? And I think, how do you address the stigma that comes with the mental health diagnosis? So I think first question can be answered by all 3 of you, because negative emotions can happen in both parents, both children, both caregivers, right? And it might be good for y'all for us to hear some of the ways you cope or you manage, and you share out that in a healthy way. Yeah, and the last 2 questions, if we can cover both, we will. One is, again, addressing stigma that comes with the mental health diagnosis, be by our family or friends, towards the person with a diagnosis. And how do parents become a friend with their children without losing their parental authority? Okay, I think that is a question that can be related to what was shared. So Laura can close the slide. So perhaps for the first question, who might be able to share. Pastor Ho, you are unmuted again, so I'm sorry I'm targeting you.
Negative emotion often lead to negative behavior. The point is, why do we have that negative emotion? If we examine ourselves when we react in certain situation, emotionally negative, and straight away we react and do something that we know it's not right, you trigger the whole cycle again and again. What causes somebody to have negative emotion? There's something that happened in our mind that happened very quickly. It's our negative thinking. And these negative thinkings are often embedded into our mind, into our worldview, into our self-value system through the years of our growing up. Now, if your parent you have been growing up with your parent always telling you you're not good enough, you're not good enough, you're a useless fella, what will you grow up with? Low self-esteem. So you always believe those words they say into your mind. And easily somebody did something that makes you trigger the thinking, your emotion will come up. Well, the reaction will come out quite naturally and you'll behave. Now, but suppose you grew up with your parents who keep telling you, you are the best, you are best, you can do it. Even you break this cup, what can we learn about how not to break this cup? Tell your children, say it's okay, don't, like what Gasper said, you don't quickly judge and scold them, but use it as a teaching moment and affirm them for when they do right and when they are not doing the right way, teach them. And the child grow with a positive self-esteem, you'll get a child with positive emotion and positive behavior. Now, what do we do when we have years that we have been bombarded with all the negative ideas, negative value system? The Bible does tell us, be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Do not conform to the world, but be transformed by the renewing mind so that you can know what the right, perfect will of God. In other words, what can replace those negative thinking? The Word of God. The Word of God affirms who we are, how we are dearly loved by God, how God has chosen us, set us apart to be holy. We know who we are in Christ. When you have a negative thinking that you are useless, you can't do much, go back to the Word of God, which says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. So the Word of God is something that will change our thinking. And it can help us with all those negative things that we have been exposed to, and then the Lord will bring us back so that we can know His perfect will. So change your thinking, change your emotion, or change your emotion. Changing your emotion will change your behavior. Yep.
Thanks, Pastor. And Jasper? Oh, you're muted. Unmute. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to resonate what Reverend Ho said. It's very important to maybe it's a personal testimony that I share here. Couple of years ago, many years ago, actually, something major happened in my life that trigger off a lot of mental struggle in me, where suddenly you felt that you're on the top of the world and everything just crashed down, right? And I mentioned that earlier that there is always a lot of choices, right? I have friends who call me out and say, hey, come, let's have a drink, and I can choose that route. Every night go out and meet with friends, and have a drink. But is that a solution that is it a long-term solution, or is it even a solution, right? As a Christian, I must say that when I work in the secular world, sometimes you are at the borderline, right? Secular world, you start to look at in Bible it says that you cannot have two gods, right? You have the earthly wealth, or you follow God, right? And that's where where you suddenly felt that everything just crashed down. And I chose to go back to the Word of God, and I'm thankful for that. And ever since that, I think God has rebuilt me, changed me inside out, right? And it takes a few years, to be frank, it takes a few years for me to recover. But when I recover, I'm stronger now, and I'm thankful that God has really journeyed with me in this direction. And that's the reason why I say that when Reverend Ho said about anchor yourself to the word of God, and that's very important. And during that time, in my early years as a Christian, when I read Bible, it's just like reading a history book, right? And but when you start to anchor during this time, when you start to be close to God and build that relationship, and that's the reason why I highlight again, relationship is very important, not just to your family member, but to God as a center of our family. Then you start to, when you read the words, and every words that you read, come differently into you and speak to you, and that's very important, because I feel that it helped me and journey through my journey and change my life. Yeah, that's all I want to add on that.
Thank you, Jasper, for that. Zach, maybe a few words from you as well. How to cope with negative emotions on your end?
Apart from what Pastor David and Gasper said, right, I will also add just one or two minor things as well. I also do think that whenever you do have negative emotions, right, don't just keep it in. There's always avenues for you to share those emotions as well. There's also avenues where you can find communities to share it with. And I think most importantly, you must remember that if you try to go at it alone, right, the problem is that if you already have negative emotions and you try to say, I can solve it by myself, you forget the fact that you already have, a bias towards having more negative emotions. So it just be a negative feedback loop. So don't just say that you can do it on your own. It is something that's worth noting. And I guess another part about coping with negative emotions, right, is that, at least from a Christian's perspective, this is something that is very common with everyone. No one's born perfect. As far as we can tell in the Christian context, only Jesus is perfect. So no one else can be perfect at the moment with our own effort. It's not possible. And so I think it's worth noting that whatever you do, always do it with other people that can be accountable with you. You can also do it with other people that can just support you in other ways. It also doesn't always need to be specific people. I think the most important part about all these things is that whatever you do for your negative emotions, you really need to be intentional about it. If you think that negative emotions for your life is fine, then you're just going to be in a perpetual spiral. But if you recognize the fact that, hey, I don't think I want these emotions anymore, and I know for a fact that it is not good for my life, then yes, do take that step to find out how you can fix it. And above all, don't just fix it on your own, fix it with other people as well within the Christian community, especially. Yeah.
Thanks, Zach.
Can I just add to what Zach have just said, and also what Gasper have earlier said? We talk about self-awareness, and sometimes it's not as simple as that. It's good to bounce off somebody else. I mean, even as a pastor, it doesn't mean I have everything worked out. The Chinese word already say 旁观者清. So when you yourself are in a problem, sometimes we can't see clearly ourselves, and we are locked into our own worldview thinking for too long. And sometimes hearing somebody from outside who is not really involved but can give you an objective, show you your blind spot and all that is really helpful. So like what Zach said, don't try to solve it. Bounce off your thought. Why am I feeling this way? And you may come out with 10 reasons, but you may miss out 2 is very more important, which somebody else can see for you. And that would be very helpful. Yeah. So as a pastor, sometimes I still need to talk to somebody. Why am I so angry about this issue? And and sometimes I get locked in, and somebody else who give me a listening ear will be very helpful.
Yeah. Thanks, Pastor, and thanks, Jasper, for sharing your own personal sharing as well, and Zach. And I think what I really glean from the three of your sharing is making space for your emotions to be heard, right? I mean, coming from a counseling perspective, that's of course what we do in a counseling room. I will promote that, for anyone to see as a safe space to bounce off ideas and perspectives, and that no emotions are bad. Actually, if we look at God creating all feelings for us, whether we can even create a space within us to sit with our negative emotions. And like what Pastor mentioned, to find out perhaps there was a root cause for how that emotion came to be, right? Was it not inherited, it didn't come from us. And we want to make space for that. Internally, if we can't do it internally, we can't sit with that, we might then bounce off with someone we feel safe with. And don't be disheartened if you can't find the right person. I mean, nobody is perfect again, but don't give up hope that, somebody somewhere will be able to show compassion to your negative emotion, and then you can do it for yourself as well. Yeah. One noting of the time, I know, I think there's one more question that might be really interesting to answer, even if it's 1 or 2 words from both of you, 3 of you. I remember is, how do parents become a friend with their children without losing their parental authority? I think because we have answered the other question on stigma, I would give a bit of time to just, wrap up this whole friendship thing, because I think that is a theme of our talk today, right? It is, balancing that role, how do you become, still be a parent, how do you still be a child, but yet, receive the wisdom and the goodness from each other without losing some of their authority, if that authority is still actually important. So of course, we want to hear from both parents as well as the child here. Yeah, so Pastor, you have something to add, or Jasper to start? Or Zach, you are now unmuted, so can I ask you to put in some words first?
Okay, next case, I'll just put it from a child's perspective first. I
Sure.
just called
Yeah.
child.
Mm.
I would say that, okay, don't mind me if I say this, but whoever wrote this, I do think that there's a bit of like a loaded statement right in there, because I know that some people will say that, oh, I need to be like a friend to my child. I don't know if you recognize this, right? But being a parent does offer you certain unique privileges, because you are literally not just, friends with your child, but you are literally raising them up, imbuing values in them. And the thing is that one of the most important aspects of being a parent is that you directly influence a lot of their behavior. And so I would say that it is true that you are maybe concerned about losing maybe your parental authority and whatnot. But I think what is more important is that you yourself are a good role model for your child, so that they will emulate it in the future. Maybe it might be too late, maybe you're not sure what to do, but I would say that at the moment, if you're talking about how to be a friend to your child, the first things first is to be a good role model. Because I do know for a fact that more often than not, what their children do is usually a reflection of what their parents have done before. So if their parents are not people that go to church often or pray often, not saying that they don't become Christian, but if they behave like that, then in the future they wonder, why doesn't my child go to church? Why doesn't my child do this or that? And then it's like, the child was like, but when I was a kid, you didn't want to go to church. You always showed up late. You didn't really seem to be interested. You're just there for that social circle. Then, of course, they will emulate it. Children aren't stupid. And I do think that that is where much of what you can do to change it will happen to you on your part. If you can be that good role model, if you can be the person that wants to listen to the child, that wants to hear what the child wants to do, and also if you are able to, walk along with your child in doing all these things, then of course you can be that friend, and not just any friend, but someone that they look up to. So I do think that it was, in terms of like being a parent, it starts internally.
Thanks, Zach, for that. Pastor Ho?
I'm talking about parent point of view. Okay, we talk about authority. There are 2 kinds of authority. One is called positional authority, and the other one is called permission kind of authority. Positional authority means I'm your father, I said so. Just listen. That's called positional authority. And you know that doesn't bring you very far. Permissional authority is when like what Zach said, I'm such a good role model that my children look up to me. and they want to listen to me. We need to earn that. As a pastor in the church, to positional authority, yes, I'm a pastor in the church. I got that spiritual authority over the people. But if I just rely on that, I'm not going to go very far. Now, when they begin to see these pastors love them, care for them, they'll begin to say, yes, pastor, tell us what to do, lead us. And they have earned that. I think we take the role model from God himself. God is the ultimate authority, but yet he never exercised authority as lording over us, but instead he laid down his life for us. He is it only a person who have authority is able to reach out the lower level. You don't ask the lower level to reach out to the higher level. It's very difficult, right? So God himself led by example. He emptied himself. Jesus emptied himself, become a man, become a man and a slave, and die on the cross for you. And so we begin to see God's exercise authority in that way, reaching to us. We now gladly choose to submit back to him. And I think that is something that as parents, we need to learn from the example of Jesus Christ. How do we see authority is given for us to do what? To love, to share, to care. That's the authority. You have authority to love, authority to provide, to protect. And that's what authority is used for, not to oppress, not to hammer somebody. If that is, then that is called abuse of authority. So the authority is not a bad word. Authority is God given to us to steward our children. And I always remember as parents, we are steward of the children that God has given for us to take care of for the season of life. And God is going to hold us parents accountable one day. I said, pass these children for you to take care. How are you been doing as a parent? And we have to take our parenting with fear and trembling, knowing that our Heavenly Father looks down on how we take care of our parents as well, our children as well.
Thank you so much. Amen to that, Reverend Ho. Really appreciate that addition. And of course, Jasper, close us up, please, with your statements. Finally,
no, not statement. I want to take reference back
time.
to Ericsson's model, right? The model that I shared, Ericsson. And you remember the important thing about it is how do we leverage on that environmental influence, right? Which is the peer, right? I think we need to be able to embrace and also to understand, this is their environmental influence at that developmental stage. So it's not just about you and him anymore. It's about you, him, and his support group, right? It's I know that when I'm okay is the moment when my son start to invite me and say, hey, I'm going to have my friend coming over. Why don't you join us for lunch or dinner? Why don't you host a lunch or dinner, for my friends? Wow, that moment is a different. As a parent, you find that wow, you invite me to know your friend or join you for your dinner and your party and things like that. And every time when I visit US, he will make sure that I get to know all his friends. And that's where I know that, hey, I'm doing okay. I'm in his circle of friends, I'm in his circle of influence, the environmental influence. And that's very important that we are mindful of, and I hope that the model also guide us along to know where to leverage on that strength. And the other one is that I mentioned earlier also that last week in the Straits Times, in the live section, there's a lot of article about parents participate in school work with the students or with the children. The children grow, do better in not just academically, but also in a growing stage, right? It also come out with richer parenting, right? So there are many testimony from these people. And you can see that if you participate in their life, you involve in their circle of influence, be part of their growing stages in that area, and not just like what Reverend Ho say, giving authority. No, this one cannot do, that one cannot do. And get to know their environment and be part of them. Then you can see from their perspective, and that articles, the few articles in the Straits Times last week, actually give you a lot of good testimonies on that. So yeah, take a read on that. Yeah. And then yeah, that's all I have. Yeah, as a parent. Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone here, our 3 panelists. And I do here as well to encourage hope for all of us here, no matter how old you are, which stage of parenting you are at, or, which stage of growing up you are at. I think it's never too late to make that connection and to adjust that relationships. Some might be more challenging if you are a parent for a long time, or some might be more challenging for you if you are a young adult as compared to a child, right? But it's never, no hope is lost lah. There is definitely still hope with the heart to connect, that all things are possible and God will make all things possible. Yeah, so I will note our time, and I really thank everyone for still being here to listen to us close up. And if there's any feedback you want to pass on to me for our talks, feel free to write in to me at my email address in CCMC, or you can also leave comments or feedback on our CCMC Mental Wellness Hub Facebook page. All right. If there's nothing else from me, I hope that you'll continue to be a salt and light wherever you are, and that we have been helpful for you. Yeah, thank you Bochai as well. I do note that some of them who left earlier have already expressed thanks to our speakers and our panelists. And
just say a quick word too after it. Quick word.
Pardon? Oh, yes, sure.
Word.
Pastor can wrap us up. A quick word before we close off for the day.
We're talking about parents. I have to talk as a child too. Some of us been brought up with parents who didn't take care of us well, and sometimes this shape who we are. Remember, I talked about our worldview. All those are often imparted by these typical people. It cause us sometimes today who we are. And the worst case is what bad parenting we receive. We do the same back to our children. I pray that you also learn to come to the Lord for healing and to break that curse that brought it down. And most important, to able to break that, besides taking Jesus, is to grant forgiveness to your parents for what they've done to you. Even if your parents are dead, in your heart, forgive them. And when you forgive them, God sets you free to be a parent now to your children.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Pastor, for highlighting that. Yes. Okay, so we are done for today. You all can go off to have a good meal, good Saturday and weekend on ahead. And hope to catch you again wherever you are, and feel free to join us for our next talks when they come. All right. Goodbye. Yeah, you can say bye and on your cameras and say bye. No, thank you so much for being here with us. I will also be sending you all the recordings of of this video with the permission, of course, of all our speakers already, so that you can watch it at your own time. And the previous talks on trauma-informed faith community has been very well received outside of the talk itself as well. So feel free to share it with your church friends if you find it helpful. Okay, I will, shall I exit everyone? Okay, I will close off and end meeting for everyone. Have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Bye, all 3 of you. Thank you again.